views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to the transformative show, We Carry the Light, with host Dr. Susan Allison, the show that inspires you to find the light within and shine your light in the world. Who are you right now? And who do you want to be? What is it that makes you happy, helps you feel fulfilled, and living your purpose? Tune in and let Dr. Susan help you discover that you carry the unique light that only you can shine. Now, here is your host, Dr. Susan Allison.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to We Carry the Light. I'm Dr. Susan, and I am so glad that you're here, either listening live or to the archive show. Later today, as most of you know, you can go to my host page at transformationtalkradio.com and listen or download the show as a podcast. And if you are missing part of the show, you're going to want to download it. It's going to be a great show. So how is your week going? Which I always ask you. I hope it's going well. And how are you? Just really take a breath and just really check in with your own inner state. And whether it's this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, depending on where you are, just check in for a moment. Well, if you listened last week to my show, you know that I got my first cold in 6 years. And even though I kept saying, oh, this is only allergies, being positive, it is a cold. And I also shared last week that whenever I have an illness, even a slight one or an accident, I have to pay attention that the universe has a message for me. My guides, my spirit allies are speaking to me. Usually the message is stop. Usually the message is stop, pay attention. What is going on in your life at a deeper level? And this is why we want you to, be lying in bed. Yes, I've been blowing my nose and drinking gallons of tea, but I also have had to stop. And the universe really wants me to slow down this time. I've been going at a breakneck pace. I have a book coming out December 1st, my 5th book. It's a big book. I have a book tour, have so much ahead, and I have been pushing. And so I've been told to stop and to rest and to pay attention to what's going on inside me. And I also have gotten that I have some grief that needs to be released. You can probably hear it in my chest. I feel the lungs really hold grief at times in our lives that we're not expressing. So I've been crying, I've been blowing my nose, I've been really releasing. So I'm seeing this cold as a gift, and I've been learning a great deal. So in a sense, paying attention really is the theme of today's show, I believe. And our show is with Robert Moss, author of Sidewalk Oracles. I really enjoyed this book, and it's a book that I've already been practicing in my life, but there are so many tools in it, so many games and everyday ways to be paying attention to the universe and its messages. So I particularly liked what he had to say about animals and the natural world. And as a vision quester, I can remember one vision quest where I really was communing and talking with clouds and rocks and lizards. And I love being out in nature and feel that there are signs everywhere about my life, about my soul's purpose, about what I'm supposed to be doing here on the planet this lifetime. And really, also, I live in a town of about 65,000 people. And I also pay attention in a city. And Robert's book helps people, no matter where they live, be able to pay attention, hence the title, Sidewalk Oracles. I tend to pay attention to bumper stickers, for instance, and music that's playing even in someone else's car. And a funny story, just a brief story, I was recently in Ireland, And this delivery truck had its door open, and the man was already inside the building delivering something. And the song was Coming On Home to You. And it was an American song blasting from this truck. And I am in a new relationship. And it was such a confirmation and a message that I was coming home to this person who is in my life, and things are going incredibly, amazingly well between us. But that was a sign that I was coming on home to him. And it was a great message to hear in the middle of Ireland, of all places. So I still do this on a daily basis, really tap into messages everywhere. And Robert's going to tell you more about how to do that in his book, Sidewalk Oracles. Robert Moss has spent his career investigating the power and purpose of the unconscious and dreams. And in his book, Sidewalk Oracles, he puts the magical realm of the multiverse within readers' easy reach. He teaches readers to become what he calls chiromancers by seeing and using the truly marvelous multidimensional universe. No exceptional knowledge is needed. The tools that he uses in the book that he highlights help people utilize rather than brush off signs, synchronicities, mysterious symbols, and hair standing on end moments of wonder. The chiromancer feels the sidewalk she treads, hears the messages awaiting receipt, and sees the extraordinary in the ordinary. Robert Moss is also the author of numerous other books about dreaming, shamanism, and imagination. He is a novelist, poet, independent scholar, and the creator of Active Dreaming, an original synthesis of dream work and shamanism. He leads creative and shamanic adventures all over the world, and you can visit him online at mossdreams.com. So hello, Robert, and welcome to my show.
What a remarkable introduction, Susan. Thank you. And already synchronicity is crackling because you mentioned several things that speak to my life. I mean, it's as important as that, speak to my life. I don't get colds very often either. But I found I developed a serious one in my recent month of travel and teaching in Europe, where in my madness I was teaching 15 full days of training back to back. I got the same message you did, however, it was not in my schedule to stop and rest. So yeah. I struggled through and came back. But when you talk about that, I heard you. I'm thinking, yes, my poor body needs to be listened to the way that Susan is listening to hers. Then you spoke about Ireland and the wonderful message of the American music blasting from the truck or the van or whatever it was in Ireland. Well, on my bucket list that I intend to realize next year is a trip to Ireland, because I'm connected with Ireland. My mother's family is Irish. I'm connected to William Butler Yeats. And although I've been to Ireland, I need to spend time in Sligo and other parts of Yeats' country. So that's deeply in my life plan. So when I heard you talking about coming home, well, for me, coming home also means going to Ireland, the country of the ancestors. So thank you for giving me that sense of connection, which is one of the things that we're here to talk about.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I also felt like I was coming home. And I thought it would be to Scotland, since my original ancestors came from Scotland and really to the far north. And I actually felt it more strongly in Northern Ireland, and was, in a research institute there digging into my family roots. And they came to this country in the 1700s, and they were in the siege of Derry, and it was being attacked by the British, and 3,000 people died there. And I mean, I was weeping. I was feeling such a connection to my ancestors in Ireland. So so I'm so happy.
Let me tell you a story involving synchronicity and dreaming with the land from Scotland then. We went to Ireland, but let's come back to Scotland,
Certainly.
Where my father's people are from. My father's people are from the western borders of Scotland. That's where the name Moss comes from. They're part of the Maxwell clan, and their triangular castle, Caerleverock, built according to magical principles as well as military principles, still stands. Anyway, without going into genealogy, I made a trip there many years ago, and I had read a book by my friend Nikolai Tolstoy, who is a descendant of the great novelist Tolstoy, called The Quest for Merlin, in which he had posited that there is a Scottish Merlin, not just a Welsh Merlin, and the Scottish Merlin is deeply a shaman of the Western tradition, and I was inspired by his book. Set in Dumfriesshire on the western borders of Scotland, which is where my father's people come from, to make a sort of ancestral journey, hoping to hook up with some of my Scottish ancestors and something of this possible story of a Scottish Merlin. Anyway, I'm going to the site of a battle, the last battle fought between the last pagan king of that part of the world and the new Christians, who've brought mercenaries from the north, from the Northmen, who are not really Christians, but they're fighting under a Christian banner. And in this battle, the Scottish Merlin was the advisor to the king, and he fled and lived wild with the deer. Anyway, I'm looking for the site of the battle. And there's a little plaque. It's not really a touristy place. People don't know about it unless they've read Nick Tolstoy's book, and few people had. And I come to the plaque, and I think this is not where the battle was fought. It just doesn't feel right. I know in my gut, in my intuition, in my ancestral memory, they've got it wrong. This is the wrong place. And I'm feeling, okay, it's nearby, though, and I find a strange triangular hill which would be in great defensive position for people trying to hold off attackers, invaders. And I'm walking the hill thinking, if this is the right place, there will be a sign. There'll be a sign from the world. The speaking land will say something. And suddenly, Susan, I come upon two black birds. I don't know whether to call them crows or ravens. They are black birds, or maybe simply blackbirds, they call them in the UK. Yeah. There are two black birds, and their talons are interlocked, and their bodies are still warm, and there's no sign that they've been shot or stuck with an arrow, anything like that. It looks as if they've fallen out of the sky fighting each other. And I think, wow, what a sign of a place of a battle that was essentially a civil war, a battle between kinsmen, that here are two black birds who've fallen out of the sky, are still warm, talons interlocked. So, truth comes with goosebumps. I got goosebumps at that moment. And that's an example of the land speaking to us, isn't it?
It certainly is. Oh, my goodness. I have goosebumps as you say that. I loved how you talk about that in your book, Sidewalk Oracles. And I had a similar experience at Chaco Canyon at the Four Corners in this country, where I went there and I recognized it immediately. I knew there was a river to my right. There were like poplar kind of trees or ash or birch trees. I was sure of it, and I knew this place. I went to the visitor center. I said, "Where's the river?" And the woman looked at me as if I were nuts. And she said, "There is no river. There are no trees. They've all been cut down. There's no river." And she was kind of a little bit, nervous around me, I think. And I sat down and started researching. And in, let's say, I think it was around 1100, maybe 1200, there was a river there. There were trees right there. I recognized the whole place and know that I had two lifetimes there. Spirit spoke to me while I was there. I got a talisman while I was there, picked it up. And so, yes, place. And all the signs we get there in those places, as you did, are very important.
Well, this conversation has already gone wonderfully beyond the fields we know, beyond ordinary understanding. Thank you for taking us there so quickly. So let me add to it. In my native Australia, the Aborigines talk about the speaking land, and this becomes a major theme in the new book, of course, as you've seen. They say that everything is alive and conscious, everything is speaking, and of course the ancestors are speaking, if we'll only pay attention. We're both giving examples right now of how the ancestors are speaking, whether we think of these voices and these visions as coming from our own past lives or the lives of others who've lived on the land. They talk to us. When I moved to upstate New York, where I now live, about 25 years ago, to get away from big cities and to learn the land, I started dreaming a language I did not know. It turned out to be an archaic form of the Mohawk Indian language. I had to learn Mohawk in order to break open these dreams. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone as a pastime. I mean, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of searching. There were no grammars or dictionaries or online courses. In those days, I had to find native speakers. And that all started happening partly because I was also dreaming into the life of a colorful Anglo-Irishman who lived in this part of the world in the 1700s. His name was Sir William Johnson. He was the King's Superintendent of Indians. He lived in the Mohawks. They knew him well. He's also a wild Irishman without any of that stuffy British class consciousness and so on. I dreamed into his life, and when I went on the track of finding Johnson and drove to his last home, I drove there as if I knew it, as if I knew the way, as if I'd always been going there. I needed no directions, walked in, and was completely at home. And so there you are. I mean, our own will call to us. I mean, our kin will call to us. Our kin will call to us across space and time, and sometimes we might regard these as past incarnations of our present selves, and sometimes we'll regard them simply as members of our spiritual family scattered across place and time. And sometimes we'll rise to the understanding. This is one of the things that this book tries to do, gently, subtly. Sometimes we'll rise to the understanding that, in a sense, it's all going on now. If you're connected to those people in the Chaco Canyon, and I'm connected to that Irishman who lived with the Mohawk Indians, maybe in a sense our dramas are running parallel to each other. Maybe things I do now affect him, but just as things that he did then, maybe they affect me. That's how we begin to sort of think about what multidimensional reality is like. That's how we start coming alive in the multidimensional universe. That's how we maybe awaken to the understanding that if it's all happening now, maybe we can do some good for each other. Maybe I can reach back to that guy in the earlier time just as he can reach forward to me, and maybe in some ways we can help and even evolve each other.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like we get really trapped in the concept of linear time. And just because I've been doing shamanic work for so long, I know that there are parallel universes. Everything is parallel, that there's a lifetime I am having actually in this other universe. And that has happened to me in journeys. And I love what you said about helping one another, because in some of the shamanic training I've done, the healing I'm doing of myself is healing ancestors, is healing other people in other times and other realities and other dimensions. So I do believe that as well.
Let me chime in here in the context of what we were chatting about just before we came on, about how the approach that I'm following in this book and in my own teaching is to bring it to people where they live. And I want to link that to what you were just saying, what we were just talking about. To the extent that I have a vivid impression of past lifetimes, to personalities intimately connected with me, whose karma I may have inherited, Susan, often they are men of power. Often they're men of power. Often they're men with the power of life and death, or men with secret power, people who played the role of high priest or tribal king or something like that. In this lifetime, conscious of that, I've made a choice to bring what I can to ordinary people where they live in a way that can empower their lives any day, and to help people to awaken what is, I think, the birthright of all humans. And for me, that means, in terms of what I teach, that means tuning into our dreams, which are common property. We all dream, whether or not we recognize it, whether or not we have a clue what's going on. We all have dream material. And in the case of this book and this practice, tuning into the fact that the world is speaking to us wherever we go will give us signs, symbols, and help and connection if we'll open to that. And although I teach at wonderful places, I teach at Esalen, I teach at incredible places up in the Carpathian Mountains of Transylvania, I teach in all sorts of exotic locales. My great pleasure in this life, partly because of that sense of a connection with lives of power that were not always lived altogether well, my choice is to bring this to people where they live in the most human, colloquial, everyday fashion.
Yeah, no, I love that. I loved how accessible your book is. And those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about Robert Moss's book, Sidewalk Oracles. I love how much humor you use, all the personal stories you tell, because it makes you real, it makes you human, and it makes the reader feel as if he or she can do this. And I would like to go to some specifics for listeners. In other words, no matter where they live, you're saying that they can have these experiences, sidewalk oracle experiences. And so say more about how a listener who doesn't do shamanic work, who doesn't analyze their dreams, how can they tap into this?
Well, this is a book of games, so let me share a couple of the everyday games that I play, and that, frankly, anybody at all can play. And you are playing games like this already, Susan. You gave us several brilliant examples in introducing this program, from looking at clouds to listening to the burst of music through the door of the van. I mean, those are examples. So two things. Well, let's talk about three things to start off with. Anybody can do any time.
Good.
Number one, you can play Sidewalk Tarot. What do I mean by that? I mean that, walking on any street, in any park, in any landscape, play the game of thinking that the things that are entering your perception are like tarot cards coming to you from the world. Of course, in a tarot deck, you've got 78 cards. In the case of the world giving you signs and symbols, the number of cards is limitless. There could be any number of cards, and you might have to do some detective work and use your imagination to figure out what that particular symbol means. Although sometimes it's pretty explicit. You see that vanity plate on that car. You see that bumper sticker if you're in an area where people still wear bumper stickers, which you and I might be, but is not the case everywhere.
Right.
The logo on that truck. You might get a verbal message. You might get the verbal message through that snatch of conversation or that chorus from that song like Susan heard. So one of the games I play, often when I'm at home, I travel a lot, but when I'm at home I do this when I'm walking my funny little dog to the park. I play this game. Let me collect the first three unusual things that the world gives me and regard them as tarot cards and make a story out of them. If I've got a particular theme on my mind, I might bring this into sharper focus. I might say, okay, I'm not going to just collect impressions, that child's chalk drawing, that vanity plate, that snatch of conversation, that barking dog. If I've got a particular theme, I might say to myself, okay, right now I would like some guidance on healing, getting rid of my cold, repairing my relationship with someone, this particular decision I have to make, and then I'll play the game, as I say, with a sharper focus. And then the first thing that comes to me in the way of something unusual or unexpected, I'm going to be willing to receive as a direct message from the world in response to my question. And sometimes that can be brilliant. May I give you a quick example?
Certainly.
Okay, well, this one is from a while back. I'd been at a conference in the Boston area, and I have a way of speaking my mind, Susan. Basically, I'm only good at saying what I think or not saying anything at all. If I speak, I tend to say what I think. And it was one of those situations where I needed to say what I thought, and I thought maybe I overdid it. Maybe I spoke too strongly. And I'm driving home. It's a long drive. It's 150, 200 miles along the Mass Pike to upstate New York, where I live. And I'm thinking, okay, have I overdone it? The next unusual thing that happens is going to be guidance on the consequences of my speaking so frankly. So it's a nice sunny day. The highway's pretty empty. I'm tooling along without looking at the speedometer, and suddenly I get a little shiver, and I notice every motorist's favorite dream is riding beside me. There's a state trooper riding parallel to me in the next lane, looking at me through his dark glasses with his hat on his head. And I look at the speedometer, and it's nearly 100 miles per hour, and I think, oh, geez. And I start slowing down. And he starts slowing down with me, exactly, pacing me, until finally I'm back at the legal speed limit, and he's staring at me through his glasses, exactly parallel. Then he tips his hat, and he takes off, whoosh. And I think, wow, I got such a specific, custom-made message from synchronicity, and in this case, from the practice of putting your question to the world. I have just learned I'm under observation. I'm being looked at. I'm being watched. I got away with it this time. They're not ticketing me this time, but I better recognize that I won't always get away with it because the universe is looking at me. And I took that advice very seriously. I said, thank you that I've got away with it this time, and I'll be more careful about how I express myself in the future. So that's an example of how, when the synchronicity thing comes into play, one of the things about it, I've talked to lots of people about how they experience it, how they feel about it. One of the things that most of us feel is the universe just got personal. I mean, the universe isn't impersonal, not at all. And
No.
we know it in the moment that synchronicity strikes. We feel that something has been crafted or concocted specifically for us, and that involves a connection with non-ordinary reality and powers behind the surface of the world, powers behind the curtain of the world. I'm absolutely convinced that some agency put that cop in that position and made him behave just like that so I would get the message as clearly as I did. It does not seem random. It seems, we can't see a logical process of causation involved in most synchronistic phenomena. We tend to feel that there's a hidden hand behind the surface of events. So anyway, coming back to everyday practice, those are things anybody can do, and there are lots of other games that people can play in the book too if you want to talk about them.
No, there are several that are my favorites. And what you were just saying, that you also said in the book, there are no coincidences. And I always
there are no coincidences that are only coincidences.
Yeah.
Mr. Jung invented the word synchronicity because he got fed up, as we all do, with the difficulty of talking about coincidence. Say it's only coincidence, meaning it's meaningful. But there are no coincidences that are meaningless. That would be the real statement. Yeah,
I completely agree with you. And I always say something about there are no accidents in terms of synchronicity and how we meet people. And because I'm in a new relationship, I loved everything you talked about. Like, I loved your own will come to you, and I love the chance encounter game. Because I feel that especially since 2012, everybody that is supposed to be on my soul's path is coming in. Wow. And it just feels like this incredible soul family. And of course, they've been coming in my whole life. But maybe I am paying more attention. But it also seems to be ramping up, that there's more of this happening. And I feel that I keep synchronistically meeting just people that are supposed to be with me on this journey. And we're helping one another create, this conscious evolution of our planet. And talk a bit about that, about this synchronicity in terms of people.
Well, that phrase, your own will come to you, is from the Irish, here we go with Ireland again, the Irish mystic, poet, artist, George Russell. I think it's very true. I think that when we are engaged in a certain course of practice, study, action, when our desires and our passions are moving and directed and producing results in a certain way, we draw other people to us. I mean, they are magnetically drawn to us. We draw other intelligences to us, not only of the living, but of intelligences beyond the mortal plane that are drawn to us because they're interested in our practice. I mean, I think anybody engaged in really creative work, really life-supporting work, will find themselves benefiting from the movement towards them of intelligences even beyond the human plane, beyond the mortal plane anyway, of master teachers, of guides, of spirit beings, if you like, who are interested in this work and want to support it. So Yeats, the poet, the Irish poet, W.B. Yeats, said with poetic clarity that the phenomenon can be the mingling of minds. It's an interesting phrase, the mingling of minds. He said that when we give our best to a certain line of work or study, we do attract the interest of greater intelligences who wish to support us because we're on this creative path, and they come forward. Now, in ordinary life, in terms of romance, relationships, work colleagues, etc., the same law applies. If you like, it's the law of attraction, which isn't always very well stated. But what is true is that there is a law of spiritual magnetism or spiritual gravitation, as George Russell again would call it. Yeah. There's a law of spiritual gravitation or spiritual magnetism, which does draw to us, or alternatively repels, different people, and I would say different events and encounters as well. It's not only about our relationship with other people, it's about our relationship with the animate conscious universe around us. Yes. And our emotions, our passions, our desires, our work, our study, or lack thereof, is always going to generate different results. Now, just to circle round to you for a moment, Susan, you're talking about entering a new relationship and so on. That is a moment in life, as I think you know, as I think you've seen and experienced, when synchronistic phenomena are going to be stirred up because strong emotions are involved. A strong transition is being made. You're in movement. You're in motion. You're not stuck in the old groove. Different things are happening. That stirs up all sorts of things in the world, sometimes to support, sometimes to oppose, but you betcha the synchronistic phenomena are going to multiply.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I love this conversation, and we do need to take a break, but we'll be right back with Robert Moss.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Pat. Have you ever noticed that this reality doesn't actually work in a way that helps you thrive? I'm thrilled to announce that one of my good friends and colleagues, Dr. Glenna Rice, is bringing the incredible world of Access Consciousness to Seattle this December. You can register and learn more for the course that's coming up on December 4th by visiting drglennaevents.com. allcinconnected.com. And when you're there, you're also going to find another event coming up in January that Gary Douglas is doing himself. So register now and wonder no more. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Pat. I am super excited about the Women of Wisdom Fall Harvest Festival coming in October. For those of you out there, if you're a healer, vendor, reader, or earth-friendly educational group seeking to participate in this fall event, well, you get to reserve your space now. To participate in this event, email wow@womenofwisdom.org. All right, everybody, we'll see you there.
Join Chris Danis for the 2015 Women of Wisdom Fall Harvest Festival, Saturday, October 24th, 10:30 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Let the transition begin. Tune in to the hit show, Majestic Insights Radio, Success for Life's Transitions, with host Carrie Keith. Carrie is a gifted intuitive coach, healer, and teacher who will lead you through her empowering techniques of ancient wisdom and awareness so you can live your happiest, healthiest, and most vibrant life. Let Carrie teach you the tools of transformation that will help you experience success for all of life's transitions. To learn more about Carrie, visit www.majesticinsights.com.
The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome back, everyone, to We Carry the Light. This is Dr. Susan Allison, and my guest is Robert Moss and his recent book, Sidewalk Oracles. We're having a great discussion. Doesn't even feel like we are on the air. We're just chatting and discussing life experiences that are phenomenal. So glad that you have joined us. And Robert, I would love to talk more about animals. You have an entire chapter on foxes, but we were talking about eagles. So, and those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about synchronicities, signs, symbols from your everyday life and from the natural world in this case. So, Robert, tell us a story about the sea eagle.
Well, the sea eagle, as you know, Susan, is native to the Orkneys, the north coast of Scotland. It's also native to the northeast coast of Australia, where I grew up. So I have a double connection. My father's people are Scottish. I grew up in Australia and was briefly in my childhood living in Queensland, where I would see sea eagles. Magnificent aquatic raptor, always felt close to it. I felt it was my first animal friend. Certain turning point in my life, I am in that drifty state in between sleep and awake, middle of the night, hypnagogic zone, and a sea eagle comes to me and I go with it. I mean, I know the bird. The bird flies me back to my native Australia from upstate New York, across the continent, across the Pacific. Very vivid sensations of flying, but also flying with the bird, with the sea eagle. It flies me back to my native Australia. I have a beautiful meeting with my mother, with whom conditions had not been great, and I want to pull myself out of the dream now and call her and honor that part of the dream. But no. The sea eagle takes me further inland, into the hinterland, as they say in Australia, in the hinterland of Queensland, into the bush. I'm standing by a muddy creek now, and another animal has become dominant, and I'm looking down into the creek. There's something enormous thrashing in the muddy waters. I don't know what it is. Is it a serpent? Is it a dragon? Is it a fish? I don't know. It's huge. I don't understand it. I turn. There's an Aboriginal man painted for ritual. He says to me in this simple but cadenced voice, he says, "This is the first of all creatures. This is the beginning of our world." Now I come out of the dream, and I write it down, of course, and then 3 months later I realize with great gratitude I'd been prepared for my mother's sudden death because we had this wonderful reunion. I fly back to Australia for the funeral and all of that, and now after that, dealing with that huge passage of death, I go bush for a while. I go walkabout without any fixed intention for a while. It's a very Australian thing. I end up in an Australian housing co-op in the middle of nowhere, a dusty little town, and they're very friendly to me, and I start talking about dreams, and the fellow says, "Oh, dreams, got to talk to Frank." "Who's Frank?" "Oh, he's the spirit man." "Where's Frank?" "Oh, 3 days, hard bush, walk up the mountain, mate." I haven't got 3 days left, but then Frank walks in. Charmants are tricky. So we get on the pub. Frank doesn't drink, but he's drinking orange juice, and he's looking at me, and he's literally sniffing me. Is this another white guy come to rip off, indigenous traditions? Then I tell him the dream of the sea eagle and the strange thing in the water and the beginning of, first of all, creature stuff. And his eyes are glowing like fire opals. And he says to me, "Oh, mate, you were sent to us for a reason. You just told me the bloody beginning of the creation story of my people, the Mananjali people, as it is told only to made men, to initiates of his tribe. And I'm invited to sit with the elders of his tribe because I have the right dream." So that's an example of how our connection with the animal spirits, in this case with the sea eagle, could take us to a deeper place. It's also an example of how, it's interesting, isn't it, cross-culturally, you need different certificates, you need different visas for different things. With a dreaming tradition, your passport is the right dream. And I must just throw one more thing in, Susan, because you've been talking about shamanism and shamanic practice. Amongst the Mohawk people, whose language I speak, the word for shaman is redzedzots. It means literally one who dreams, a strong dreamer, one who, by implication, has the power to enter dreaming at will, to heal people through dreams, to dream for and with other people. The central qualification of a shaman or healer, it also means healer, built into the language itself, is a particular proficiency at dreaming, particular power of dreaming. That is a central prerequisite for being a shaman.
I love it. I love it. So fascinating. And I had goosebumps all over me when you described the shaman walking in and telling you that you could sit with them, and just goosebumps all over me. What an incredible story. Incredible story.
Truth comes with goosebumps. I mean, I say again and again in this new book, Sidewalk Oracles, of course, we need to develop a science of shivers. We need to pay attention to when our senses are a quiver and we're getting chicken skin or goosebumps, because that's how we know that things are for real, that things are important. We should never push that aside. That's how we know that something real and true is going on.
No, I love that. I'm glad you're saying that to listeners, so that when you get goosebumps, and I've been paying attention to them for years, and in my therapy practice, I will say something or somebody will say something to me and I'll get goosebumps all over me. And I always tell them, you know, I just had shivers, I just had goosebumps, and I know this is true, what we're talking about. And I will get visions when I'm working with people and share it with them, and I'll have goosebumps during those visions. So I love it that you say that over and over in the book, is to pay attention to those shivers and goosebumps.
I've heard that there is a particular branch of the Mayas, I can't remember which one it is, but it's one of the branches of the Maya in Guatemala, who have a particular kind of shaman called a lightning shaman, because this kind of shaman has a special relationship with lightning, but very specifically is able to recognize up to 50 different types of energy movements within his or her energy field. Just imagine that, being able to discern the difference between maybe 50 different kinds of shivers, of energy movements within your field. I can't do that. It's enough for me just to say I've got goosebumps and pay attention, but I'm intrigued by the idea that in some practices it might be more specific than that, more refined than that, more precise than that. We're talking about a very ancient understanding. I mean, I was once a junior professor of ancient history, and I was fascinated by oracles and divination and gods and mythology in the ancient world. And I noticed again and again when I read the ancient descriptions of what is going on when humans are in contact with the divine, when a god or goddess is drawing close, when the oracle is getting ready to speak, when the Pythia, when the Sibyl is getting ready to speak, everything is a quiver, everything is shaking a little bit, everything is trembling, nothing is static, everything is slightly at a tilt. That's also what we're talking about when we say the truth comes with goosebumps. Nothing is absolutely fixed anymore. Everything is quaking and shivering a bit. And what has this got to do with living by synchronicity? Everything, because if you can recognize that goosebumps matter, if you can trust your feelings about whether something is important or not, if you trust your feelings to tell you whether this coincidence is more than coincidence, then you're on the right track to becoming what I now call a chiromancer.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And I mean, your book is so accessible to anybody. And are you saying anybody can become a chiromancer? Yes.
I mean, you get good at it by practice, but probably prior to even thinking about the practice is your degree of openness or lack of openness. I mean, it begins with being open to seeing things in a new way, being open to noticing things that are outside the grid of your expectations, with being ready to get off plan, get off schedule, and be present to the world around you. Get out of headphone land. Use all of your senses. Walk in the park or on the beach or in the woods or on a gritty urban street and see what's going on around you, and be open to new impressions and new experiences. It starts with openness. And that's how it starts. In terms of being able to develop the ability to recognize what is important or not, to use non-ordinary sources in ways that are practical and helpful, well, as with anything else, as with dreaming too, it's practice, practice, practice. But this is material available to all of us. The world around us is alive, it's speaking to us. All we need to do is be open, pay attention, be willing to say thank you for a new experience, and then maybe to do something with it.
Exactly. No, I like that you just mentioned that, because also in your book you talk about taking action. So you've described it several times, and so have I, that you get a message, whether it's the state trooper or another one, the Sea Eagle, that you actually then change, or you do something, you take action. So say something about when we have these synchronicities, these signs, these symbols, then what?
Well, let me give you another simple example. And this is one that can speak to anybody, I think, because it's such an ordinary story. Just an ordinary story, nothing special going on. But it becomes a perfect response to your question, I think, about how to take action and what to do with these things. So I have a theme on my mind one morning. My theme is, how can I possibly balance two different projects I've agreed to do? I mean, I'm starting to feel the demand on my time and energy is going to be too great. They're probably mutually competitive. It's going to be difficult. So the theme on my mind is, how the heck can I balance and do both of these projects that are coming due? And I'm walking my dog to the park, and I haven't set a specific intention. I haven't said to the universe, give me a response, but it's on my mind. I'm carrying that theme. Big guy gets out of the big truck. I don't know him. He's carrying a big box or something or other. He stops in the middle of the street, blocking us for a moment. He looks down at my 20-pound little dog and he says, well, he can't kill both of us at once, can he? And I'm looking at him. I mean, this is astonishing. I mean, I'm speechless. The stranger says this. I'm walking up the street. I say nothing, and I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here? Then I remember what I had on my mind. Can I handle two projects? And the guy just said, he can't kill both of us at once, can he? He's saying you can't take on two things at once. The dog couldn't take on two people at once. It's a joke.
That's right.
I suddenly realized the joke has given me a way of approaching my problem. And the way is pretty clear when I think about it. I cannot do both. I'm going to have to drop one. But the story gets actually better, because not only does it help me make a decision, I've got to drop one of these two things, can't kill both of them at once, but actually gives me a way to communicate that decision in a fashion that gets me off the hook of someone else's possible anger and disappointment. Because I'm going to let somebody down. Both people thought they had me contracted. I mean, not a formal contract, but, understanding. Both people thought that they had me on board for projects they consider very important. They want me, and the person I'm going to call is going to be very upset. And he is. I call him. He's very cold. He's very frosty. He's not happy at all. He doesn't understand what's going on. And then I say, look, may I share the reason that I came to this decision? I simply tell him the story of the big guy saying to the little dog, he can't kill both of us at once. The guy on the end of the phone shifts from anger and disappointment to raucous laughter. He sounds like he's falling off his feet. Oh, I get it. I think I get the synchronicity stuff. Yes, you did absolutely the right thing. Give them that message. Wow. That's all you can do. No hard feelings. Fine. Bye.
Wow.
So not only did I get a decision, I got a way to communicate that decision through this silly episode in the street. I mean, it's so ordinary. That's one of the things that I love, Susan. I mean, I get to go to some extraordinary places. I have some really far-out adventures. You can imagine how far out they sometimes are. And I write about those in some of my books. My goodness, in my book, Dream Gates, I write about taking a whole group of 35 people on a shamanic journey to the Sirius star system. So, I mean, we get out there. We do some interesting things. We explore the multidimensional universe. But what I really enjoy is putting it in the midst of life, in this case on a gritty, small-town street with a little dog and the guy getting out of the pickup truck. Because I feel that when I do that, not only is it empowering and orienting my life in very human, colloquial ways, but it can speak to anybody else and give them a clue about how to live with a little bit more magic.
Yes, and you do this so well in your book. You do it so well, because I love your stories. And you're very, very much down to earth, and you're very real. And so people can read this and say, oh, I can do this. It's not far removed from me. I live on this street. I can just walk down it. And you talk in the book about picking up coins and, just very simple things that we all do, that we all see. And I'd love, maybe we could talk maybe a little more about your games that people can play.
Absolutely.
Games.
Yeah. Here's one that I love. I mean, notice what's showing through your slip. I mean, we all make slips. We get names wrong. We forget something. We make typos. We're texting. We're sending messages fast. We make typos. Usually we just sort of correct them or ignore them or apologize for them or just wonder whether we went missing for a while. I pay very close attention to slips of the tongue. By the way, Freud was good about this, although he wasn't necessarily always very helpful in his interpretation. But we talk about Freudian slips, meaning not only something that might have a little sort of sexy undertone, but, the idea of Freud paid close attention to slips. He, as I say, he was good on that. Let me give you an example. So I'm fairly good on names in an organized environment. If I'm leading a workshop, I can handle a lot of names because people are introducing themselves. I'm focused on their energy profile. I get it. I'm not so good in random, casual, social environments. But workshops, I'm good at names. So I pay very close attention myself if I'm screwing up names. So I'm in one workshop, and here's a guy, let's call him Jack. And 3 times I call him Mark, let's say. And finally I say, because I know his name is Jack, finally I say, Jack, who is Mark? Why am I calling you Mark? And he bursts into tears. And he says, oh, Mark was my partner. Oh. We loved each other dearly. He died 6 months ago, and I'm wearing his sweater.
Oh.
So suddenly in that moment I understood. It's an example of what the bleep we know that we don't know that we know. I realized that through my slip I was acknowledging something I was not consciously aware of at all. The energy of the dead partner, the energy of the departed beloved was still with him in the room. And out of that recognition then came a great deal of healing. He was able to do healing work based on the need to recognize his relations with Mark and what kind of help Mark needed from him and what kind of help he needed from Mark and to what extent they needed to make an energetic separation in order for both of them to live the lives they were now meant to be leading. So that's an example of what's showing through the slip. Let me tell you a quick story from American history about this, if you're game for it. May I do that?
Certainly.
Mark Twain. I mean, everybody knows something about Mark Twain. Everyone's got at least one Mark Twain one-liner or snapper, great beloved American humorist. Mark Twain lived by synchronicity. I put a chapter about him in another of my books called The Secret History of Dreaming, and it's called Mark Twain's Rhyming Life. He was a great practitioner of what I now call chiromancy, the art of recognizing and acting on the special moment. And I talk in that book about how he found incredible opportunities in his life through coincidence, which was more than coincidence. But he missed something. He missed a slip. And it nearly destroyed his life and cost him all his money at a period when he was getting on in years. And I just want to tell the story briefly because it's a cautionary tale about what happens when we fail to pay attention to a slip. And it's about how a slip might mean a lot more than we think it is. Mark Twain had been a printer's devil in his youth. That means a kid who's employed to type the old-fashioned way, great big heavy metal bits and pieces. So when he made a lot of money as America's best-selling author in his day, he decided he'd invest his money in making a new printing machine, which was a new phenomenon, a printing machine that could set type automatically and smooth the process. So he gave a lot of money to an inventor named Page. Page spelled his name Paige. Mark Twain, in all the correspondence he had with this man who was giving his money, could never spell his name right. He always spelled it Page, like a page, leaving out the I. Why is this significant? Well, by the time Page had taken all of Mark Twain's money and still failed to develop a really good printing machine, someone else had jumped ahead and made a much better printing machine. So Mr. Page's product was now worth nothing. Mark Twain basically lost all his money, had to restart his whole career, go on a lecture tour to Australia, where he did not want to go by boat in those days, to get his money back because he failed to notice the significance of a slip. Isn't that interesting?
Really
so
interesting.
We've got these stories from the history of interesting people as well as from our own lives. But so that's a cautionary tale about the possible consequences for not noticing a slip. So I would say it again, pay attention to the slip, see what's showing through the slip. That's a good one. Here's a big one. This is an existential one. Check your attitude. Check your attitude. I mean, this is the law of attraction again, if we want to call it that. I mean, we know that thoughts and feelings are already actions. I think most of us sometimes wake up to the fact that whatever attitude we are carrying goes ahead of us in life. It goes around the corner, generating events and encounters that will follow. So check your attitudes. Take a moment several times during the day. Okay, What is my attitude right now? What is my attitude towards life? What am I saying on my internal soundtrack? That's a game in itself. Check your internal soundtrack. What are you saying to yourself right now? What song is playing in your head other than it's playing on the headphones? Check that. Check what is playing in your head right now, because you might be surprised by what it is. Maybe you're telling yourself, oh, I feel so sick. Oh, I feel so old. Oh, I feel crapped out. And you know what? You might feel that way, but if you're just going to carry that unconsciously, the world's going to give you lots of reasons to make you feel even worse. So it's not that we can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. We have negative thoughts. You've got to pay attention and get the message and act on it, just as you were saying when you talked about your cold. But take that moment, check your inner soundtrack, check your attitude, see if you can turn it, dial it up a little bit for the better.
Yeah, no, you also have another part in the book where you call it, by what you fall, you may rise.
Yes. This is
like
huge.
It.
This is one of the great rules of living by synchronicity, one of the great rules of life, period. You could put it various other ways. You could say, for every setback, look for the opportunity. You can say, every time a door slams in your face, look for the door that might be opening. By what you fall, you may rise. It's about recognizing, which is so difficult to do when we feel downtrodden, we feel abandoned, rejected, put out in the cold, we've lost our money, we've lost our partner or something. It's so difficult to do it in that moment. But if we can pause for a moment and say, okay, this does not seem to be the best. In fact, this seems to be effing awful. But maybe there will be an opportunity. Maybe something will come out of this. Maybe if I'm available to the new situation that might arise, maybe I'll get through. And another aspect of this, maybe an even deeper aspect, is to recognize what your failings seem to be, what your challenges seem to be, what your illness or your despair or your accident seems to be, could contain a gift for you. I mean, I've told in various places the story of Harriet Tubman, who was a black woman who got about 300 escaping slaves to freedom before the American Civil War out of the slave South. She had taken a terrible wound. She had taken a 2-pound lead weight in her forehead thrown by an angry overseer at somebody else. It left a sort of hole in her forehead all her life. And the effect it had on her brain was to make her need kind of narcolepsy. She'd have to lie down, take a quick nap. And in those naps, Harriet Tubman would have dreams or visions, and she would see ways to freedom. And she'd get maps by which she could lead escaping slaves out of the slave South to freedom. That's an incredible example from a life much rougher than the lives that most of us listening to this program will have to lead, of someone who took a terrible wound and found a gift in the wound that was for other people as well as herself. So it's also about finding the gift in your wound, our wound, my wound. All of us can find a gift in the wound. It's a good thing to try to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. Reminds me of John Muir, who became blind at a foundry accident. He had a piece of metal in his eye, and soon after, both eyes were blind. And he got down on his knees and said, if I am restored to sight, I will devote my rest of my life to the wilderness. His sight was regained miraculously, got on a steamer, went to San Francisco, and then walked to Yosemite, and the rest is history.
Wow. Thank you for reminding us of that absolutely wonderful story in which not only is there a gift in the wound, but actually the wound is healed. And it teaches us something more, doesn't it? It teaches us to recognize that we are not alone in this conscious universe. There are greater powers. There are saving powers. There are everyday angels. There are spiritual guides. And we want to remember to ask for help. And if we're going to do that, we want to ask for help nicely as he did. Because, you know, if you are the archangel or the God or the spirit of nature listening behind the curtain of the world, you get fed up with humans who are just saying, gimme, 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 fix this, fix this. We want to learn to ask really nicely.
And with gratitude, which you talk about in your book. And we're almost at the end of the show, Robert, but I want you to tell people how to contact you, how to get your books, and about any events that you have coming up.
Well, mossdreams.com is the website. Moss like the stuff that grows on trees, dreams plural, mossdreams.com. We have a community Facebook page called Active Dreaming, which is bringing together people who want to learn these techniques and apply them and share with each other. You might enjoy that. I teach online courses as well as live workshops. I teach all over the world map, and if you go to the events calendar at mossdreams.com, you'll see I teach at all sorts of places. I teach in Esalen, I teach at Berkeley, I teach at a wonderful private retreat center near Seattle, I teach in Europe. But I also teach really quite exciting online courses of the Shift Network these days. A new one is starting on December 10th called Active Dreaming, the Essential Training. You might enjoy that. We've actually succeeded in bringing together a fabulous international community of active dreamers who are enjoying this stuff, and their sharing with each other is as much fun as anything else. So those are some of the things to do. I mean, I've now published 12 books in this general field and some audiovisual products, and the details of those are at mousedreams.com.
That's amazing. And hang on a moment after the show. I have a question for you. But for now, we need to say goodbye. And thank you so much for being here.
What a pleasure, Susan. Thank you so much. May your best dreams come true.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for wanting to pay attention to your inner wisdom and to the wisdom that's all around you, just waiting to guide you and enrich your lives. Next week, please join me and my dear friend, Michelle Demoulin, who's a gifted channel and teacher who will help us get out of our heads and into our hearts and into the love we are. Until then, remember that you carry the light.
You've been listening to the transformative show, We Carry the Light, with host Dr. Susan Allison, the show that inspires you to find the light within and shine your light in the world. Who are you right now, and who do you want to be? What is it that makes you happy, helps you feel fulfilled, and living your purpose? Tune in every Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, and let Dr. Susan help you discover that you carry the unique light that only you can shine.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.